Mm-hmm.
Welcome. Welcome to the month of November. And so it's a new topic, a new theme that we will explore during this month. So our guest speaker for today is going to lead this off. Her name, Dr. Mary Worden, and she is going to talk about conflict resolution and conflict management and define it for us, both conflict management and conflict resolution, so that we can all be on the same page as to what that means. So at this point, I turn it over to Dr. Mary Worden.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here talking with you, and look forward to sharing some ideas today. I'm a psychologist in Chicago, and I'm also a former poor handmaid. So I've been a friend of the poor handmaids for a long time. I'm honored to be invited to present with you.
Thank you.
I'd like to share my screen now.
Okay.
All right. Conflict management and resolution. Okay. Can we start over? I got stuck.
We're good. Just go right ahead. Just go right ahead.
I'd like to start off with a story about a friend of mine, Jenny, my Saturday morning hiking buddy, and her daughter, Grace. Grace is starting first grade this year after being homeschooled last year because of the pandemic. She started off wanting to make friends, a little nervous, made a few friends, and then after a few days, kids started teasing her. And she came home and talked to Jenny and, was very upset. And Jenny, instead of calling the other parents of the kids, instead of talking to the teacher or the principal, talked to her daughter and said, why don't you tell them that you don't like it and ask them not to do that? Tell them that you want to be friends. And she did. And they changed. So it's an example of building a sense of autonomy and skill at a very early age, instead of needing someone to rescue you. And so that is just a little example of some of the ways that conflict may be playing out for people. All right. So an overview of what I'll be talking about today, this introduction, key concepts and processes related to conflict management and conflict resolution, looking at some skills to address these things, and then the resources, kind of a list of references and resources, and then the questions that you'll be discussing later on.
Great.
So what is conflict? It's a disagreement, a clashing of interests, clashing of opinions, principles. Jeremy Pollack, who wrote the Conflict Management Playbook, said others impede or threaten our needs, and that's what brings about conflict. What are the risks of conflict? We clash, right? People get hurt, or relationships get damaged. And sometimes it's not just the people involved in the conflict, it's all those living with them who now don't know what to do, walking on eggshells. But there are also benefits to conflict. I like this picture. So the dogs, instead of pulling against the stick, are playing together, right? So they found a creative resolution, a creative way to solve their problem, right? And so creativity is one of the things that can come out of conflict. If people are stuck in their ways and everybody thinks, nothing's ever going to change, there can be a disengagement, and conflict may bring people back to a sense of engagement within the group. You gain some new perspectives. It might enhance communication and empathy and relationships. All right. So in conflict management, disputes are resolved. You try to minimize the negative effects of conflict and support the safety and autonomy of those involved. So some of these references come out of an HR perspective in terms of work, but much of this applies whether you're talking about living in community or being in a work or ministry situation. So there's disagreement about something. And conflict management tries to help people get back on track in order to keep moving forward. There are 5 basic conflict management styles. You might find yourself in one or more of these. Accommodation, you sort of give in. And for these, there are pluses and minuses both ways, right? Accommodation can be good if it's not a big deal, if it's kind of a small issue, let's just move forward. If it's a bigger issue, accommodating might cause some people to maybe think less of the person who gives in. Avoidance, ignoring or evading the issue, can be helpful if everybody needs a cool down period. But if it goes on too long, then it works against the group being able to benefit and to continue to work together and strengthen the relationship. Compromise is the third one. So both give up something for a solution. And some places this is actually called lose-lose, because you give something up and you're like, I really wanted my idea, you know. Fourth one is force. So one person just won't back down. A benefit of this is perhaps it's an ethical issue. Perhaps this is a stand we need to take, and it's a benefit to not back down. However, in lots of situations, it can create more of a hindrance within the group, that there might be resentment, there might be disengagement, things like that. And the fifth one is collaboration, where you're working toward a win-win, so that everyone ends up feeling satisfied as opposed to feeling dissatisfied. The trick with this is that it takes a lot longer, right? It's a lot more work, but people put their minds together and bring out the best in the gifts of each person. So these are some strategies in terms of conflict management. I think probably over the next several sessions, you're going to be breaking down a lot of ideas about strategies and our own internal approaches. I'm just going to be giving some of these today. So be calm, try to establish a dialogue, don't take sides, find the origins and the source of the conflict, talk to both sides, identify how the problem can be solved, try to find a common goal and agree on the solution, and review how the agreed decision was implemented, and learn how to avoid such conflicts in the future. Sounds really simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Conflict resolution, in my mind, takes it a little bit further. So it's a process through which people build trust that their needs won't be impeded or threatened by someone else. So the goal is to solve the problem and maintain the relationship, not just keep the group or the relationship running smoothly, but actually work at a deeper level and address some of the maybe the more emotional issues or attitudinal issues, trust issues. And so I'm using some of the work of Jeremy Pollack, who wrote this conflict resolution playbook. He says that it's about needs. And he says that there are these 6 psychological needs, particularly related to conflict. And that when some of these are threatened or impeded, that's where the conflict can come from. So it's usually not a disagreement of facts. It's when these things are threatened. One's identity, a sense of safety, care, autonomy, growth, and stimulation. And so he says when any of these are thwarted, right, then conflict can emerge from that. He has a model or a process that he suggests, and I'm going to share that with you now. He calls it a clearing task, and it's helpful when people have built up a sense of resentment. So this could be in terms of addressing conflict, or perhaps it can even be used to prevent conflict. So the clearing task is kind of a little bit of a script, right? And so I'm going to practice here. So I would say, Michelle, I feel embarrassed because when you tell that story about that thing that happened to me a long time ago, and everybody laughs again, it really bothers me. I interpret it as that you don't really care about me because I've told you this so many times. And as a result, I don't trust that I really want to kind of be more open with you because I don't know when these things are going to come out and I'll be the butt of the joke. So what I need from you is when I've asked you to let it go, it's just to let it go. Right? And so that's a way of releasing some of those resentments. So, okay. Another area that you may have heard of, another concept you may have heard of in terms of conflict is something called the drama triangle. I'm going to take a moment to talk about that. Oh, first we're going to talk about culture. Sorry.
Okay.
We have cultural differences, right? Obviously, you spent your first several weeks talking about intercultural living. I find this a very useful way of looking at they're called worldview or value orientations from Kluckhorn and Strodebeck. Their work came out in the 60s and it's been developed further, but I really like it. So what it basically says is that in these human activities, basic concerns, people have different orientations based on how they were raised, how their culture has what they've fostered, right? For example, the second one, relationship to the natural world. Are we here as masters of the natural world? Are we here to live in harmony to the natural world, or are we to submit to the natural world, right? Whatever culture we grow up in, it makes sense to us that that's the way things are, but we may get into a clash when we come from someone who has an entirely different orientation. So rather than to say even different, we might say an other orientation, just as a way to minimize that idea of conflict, that you're different from me, like I'm the right one and you're different. So it's other than. So Pollock gives some ideas about working around these cultural issues, talks about educating yourself, letting go of the desire to be right, and seeking mutual understanding, not persuasion. Empathize on an individual basis. If you have a situation where you kind of have a bias about a particular group, focus on the individual you're working with, right? Recognize what you have in common. So the idea is not to try to show somebody why they're wrong or why it's not right, but you're trying to learn from them and let them learn from you. Okay. Here we go. This is the drama triangle that I alluded to earlier. So we may have heard of this. You have probably lived it, even if you've never heard of it. Cartman was a doctor who proposed these ideas in the 60s, and he actually worked with Eric Berne, who developed transactional analysis and games people play and all that body of work. So he proposed that there's a victim, a persecutor, and a rescuer. And the rescuer has a need to take care of people. The victim has a need to be taken care of, and the persecutor has a need to dominate. And so if you've been in this, you may have been the victim, right? But when somebody came in to rescue you, you might say, well, why are you doing that? You know, you did this and this and this, right? So they become a new persecutor. And so the roles can shift, but it's not a pleasant thing. It's not fun, and it's hard to get out of. There's David Ireland, Ireland, nice. David Emerald has come up with a further step of this, and that is, rather than victim, one can be a creator. So they are autonomous, that their autonomy and their sense of responsibility takes over, as opposed to them feeling weak and not being able to manage things. The persecutor doesn't have to be seen as a persecutor, rather they're a challenger, and they can help the creator think through things in a different way. And the rescuer then becomes a coach. So rather than taking care of the other person, they are giving some guidance, but helping that person to grow on their own. So these might be some models that you might use as you're working on some of these things within your own local groups. Let's see here. So I want to kind of move into a few other kinds of skills, and I consider skills, attitudes, and behaviors both, right? Starting off with mindfulness as a skill, and being in the present moment can help us with pretty much anything. But in terms of dealing with conflict, to let go those things from the past or worries about the future, and just take a mindful approach. And so Rosalie Puiman actually wrote a book about mindfulness-based conflict resolution. She talks about ways to be mindful in difficult situations. These are values of first proposed by John Kabat-Zinn, but quoted through her: being non-judgmental, having a sense of acceptance, having a beginner's mind, meaning that you look at something with fresh eyes. You trust yourself, you trust the other person, you have a sense of patience, gratitude, generosity. So bringing this kind of a stance into a difficult situation can help you when you might start to be sort of triggered or defensive about what's going on. Just keep that mindfulness, keep breathing, right? Keep that groundedness in yourself. Other helpful attitudes are adaptability, resilience, humility, empathy, curiosity, and optimism. And I guess my top three there are humility, curiosity, and optimism. That if we can bring those to the fore, many things are possible. If we've sort of given up, they're going to do what they're going to do, really hard to get into that. Okay. You had some presentation, I think, earlier on nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's ideas. I came across some of his work on dealing with difficult people, so I wanted to share this. This is a process that he proposes people can use to help themselves in a nonviolent way to look at themselves and also to deal with the other person. So first of all, to be clear about what they do that triggers me, right? Be clear about what they do that triggers me. Maybe it's a laugh, maybe it's some nonverbal communication. Maybe it's telling that same story over and over again. There is no story, by the way. Michelle and I are friends for a long time. I don't think there's a story like that, but it was an example. So be conscious about how I am judging this person who makes me so angry, right? So own my being judgmental. Be conscious about that. And then look behind my judgment with empathy to see what need of mine is not being met. Look at what need of mine is not being met. And then consider what the personal need the other is trying to meet when they do what annoys me. They are also having needs. They're trying to meet their own needs. And then empathize what's going on with them when they do it. And so this is a way to sort of take down that resistance, that defensiveness, when you kind of own your own stuff, and you can look at it not as a way to be harsh with yourself, but to understand that we all have needs, and sometimes those needs are get thwarted, right? Other people have needs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Helpful behavioral skills, observation. And so this is nonverbal communication. It can be somebody sort of giving you the side eye. They don't want to look at you in the eye at all. Self-management is all the ways that we tune into ourselves, right? Am I tense? Am I thinking about the next thing? Am I looking at my phone? Is my stomach in a knot? So self-management is sort of paying attention to yourself, but then doing those things like some breathing or some refocusing to help ourselves be able to continue in this work. Assertiveness, so being able to stand up for yourself. Framing, and framing means taking a different perspective about something, right? Mm. So we can say the pandemic was horrible, is horrible, and there is a lot of negativity, negative and tragic things that have happened, and yet I visit with my mother and my siblings every week on Zoom, and we would have never done that before the pandemic, right? There are things that happen, right? And so are we going to frame this in a more optimistic way, or in a way that's going to help us work better? Or do we want to sort of just stay with that fixed mindset that's sort of like we're having the same argument over and over again? And then lastly, collaboration, where we're bringing out some of the best things in each other. So understanding other people's gifts, it means getting to know each other. Some suggestions: pre-arrange a time and a place to talk it out. Help yourself be ready to listen. Know your purpose. Ask what the other person is looking for. So you just might be looking for information. You might be looking for an opinion. You might be trying to make a decision, right? You want to know what's your purpose, and then understand what the other person's purpose is as well. And so you want to actively listen for understanding, not rebuttal. I think you've probably talked in your communication sessions about this active listening, where we've all had the experience of somebody's just waiting for you to take a breath so that they can jump in and tell you what they want to tell you, not having listened to a thing. So that's not active listening, obviously. That's sort of the opposite. When we're trying to resolve conflict, we really want to be actively listening to understand the other person. This kind of helps to really connect and engage the relationship, show a sense of care, develop empathy, and not be focused on trying to convince them why they're wrong and you're right? That conflict is not a zero-sum game. I guess that's part of the whole view here, is that we're looking for ways that everybody can have a sense of satisfaction, that everyone can win. I can win and you can win is the way one person put it. Mm-hmm. All right. A few other tips: don't make it personal. Keep calm. Use I statements. So when you do this, I feel this way, as opposed to you make me crazy when you do that. Right? That's probably not going to engender an openness to discussion, right? Or to sharing. But when you claim what you are feeling, right? Instead of blaming and judging, that opens some doors. Avoid generalizations like you always or I never, and be clear, one question at a time. Stick to the topic. Don't bring up the past. Okay, these are probably just good general communication tips, but also kind of translate into the world of conflict management and conflict resolution. And so finally, we can't have a good presentation without quoting Brene Brown. She's written some really wonderful things. And she says, it's not about knowing and being right, but learning and getting it right. So that we're on this journey, right? We're not trying to, but we might feel like we want to, if everybody would just listen to me and do what I know is right, we would all be happier. We may have that feeling, but truly we are learning and resolving things together because we are in relationship with each other. Okay, so not about knowing and being right, but learning and getting it right. So we get it right together, and it's a process. Right. So here's some references and resources, and I can make this available in a Word document if that's easier.
Sure, that's fine.
And then lastly, a couple of questions based on some of the things that I've talked about here. So these will be for your local communities. What has been your typical way of dealing with conflict? And to remind you, accommodating, avoiding, forcing, compromising, collaborating. How has it worked for you? And in what way has it not served you or your community? So what one of those um, dynamics is more your style? And secondly, consider a conflict that you have faced recently. What needs of the other person were not being met? And what needs of yours were not being met?
Mhm.
Just take a little bit of reflection on that. And, you know, if you sit with yourself, you can probably get to what those needs are. You may have to think a little harder about the needs of the other person, but that's kind of the point here is we both have needs, right? And we get into these clashes when our needs are not being met. We might be arguing about this, but it's really about this. It's really about something at a lower level. So that's my talk for today. I hope that you find it useful and have some good discussions and good sharings and strengthen the relationships, the bonds of community, right? Because that's why we're in this.
Mary, thank you. Thank you so much. You've given us kind of a reflection of who we are in all of these different the different theories that you presented on conflict management as well as conflict resolution, and helping us grow in how we deal with others. It's really important in community that we have and we practice other ways of dealing with others rather than walking out the door and slamming it or whatever. Whatever the way, I'm not going to talk to you forever again, kind of thing. And we carry that burden. We carry that burden with us. Even though we think that we're in the right, so it's not a burden. It doesn't mean it's not all about with being right. It's about getting it together, getting it right together, and working as a community, working in community, working with your colleagues who are your sisters, your sisters in profession, in whatever your profession is. So thank you so much. And you've given us really good questions that we're going to share on in our reflection groups. And so our sisters will find those questions posted, as well as this video, and the information about you, your bio and picture. So thank you so much for joining us today and educating us about these issues of life. It's because we're all just plain human. And this is Earth. I had a friend. She was one of my professors, actually, when I was doing my doctoral work. And she used to always say whenever there was we brought up a conflict, she would go, oh, this is Earth, it's just not heaven. So we're going to have all this. So I love that line. This is just Earth. And this is who we are as human beings. So thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Good to be with you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.